This is just a different shingle, same stuff. I'm going to bet on Stacey. Every year you put off fulfilling your own dream, you're just building some CEO.
You gave up a lot of security in doing what you did. And I loved what you said about how you bet on yourself.
My husband got sick and I didn't have to ask for permission to be off. My job, my role at that point was making him as comfortable as he could possibly be. I was able to be there for him mentally, emotionally, physically. I'm giving them hope.
We have a question for every guest. Who are you becoming? Because we're always growing, right?
You know, I think sometimes when you're working in corporate and a woman leadership, you're silenced. And now I have a voice.
Do you have any questions for us or anything before we get started?
No, I mean, from what I understand, I didn't necessarily have to prepare.
Yeah.
We're just going to be interactive and so forth, and it's not live. So if I stumble, you'll fix that. So.
And if we stumble, I'll fix that too. Because there's a lot of stumbling that happens here. It's a podcast about the messy middle, after all.
Yeah. So we stay true to that.
Yes, without even meaning to. We always do.
We mean it.
Yeah. Guest today is Stacey Divers-Turner. And Stacey built a high-level corporate career for 36 years. She's an extremely brilliant executive, a mother, and recently widowed. She knows a thing or two about what life in the messy middle is like, the challenges that she's faced, the pivotal moments, and how they've come at a most inopportune and difficult time. There's so much you'll be able to glean from her story. We're going to unpack it as best we can in the time that we have together. Stacey, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our absolute pleasure. It's a little bit of a mystery, actually, how we connected in the first place. You landed on my calendar, and neither of us had any idea how.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know why we're here, but
yeah. But it worked out so well, and I knew that day when we talked, I knew that I wanted to invite you onto the show. Thanks for agreeing to be here. If you would, Stacey, please begin by telling us a bit about some what I call mile markers of your early journey, what led you into the corporate world, and what kind of positions you held for those 36 years.
See, when we go way back in memory lane. So
the mile
absolutely.
markers.
Absolutely. I started in insurance right out of high school. When I initially went into insurance, I was in human resources and claims. I had positions in those. And then I was in school. So I was going to school and building my career. I was with Allstate Insurance. I left Allstate after 5 years, and then I went to work for social services. And I was working part-time as a telemarketer for an agent. And after probably 6 months, she asked me to come on and help her build her agency. So I was an associate agent selling insurance to individuals. I did that for about 3 years with her. Then I went out and had my own agency. And after I got my degree, in my mind, the next step was to go corporate. I wish I'd had a mentor and say, no, continue to be your own boss. But I went corporate, and I was working at Nationwide Insurance, and I talked to the CEO, and he said, Stacey, you know, why are you potentially considering building an agency with another company? And I said, because, you know, this is an organization that has, you know, all these different things. And he had come from that company, and he said, well, if you stay here, let me create you a job. So he created me a role to be the compliance director across the entire all 50 states for the company and property and casualty. It was fun. I was able to travel to all 50 states, probably how I got to see a lot of the states. And I ran compliance for about 2.5 years. But coming out in agency world, going into compliance with the rules, with just the rules, it wasn't too fun. So then I left compliance and I got into project leadership and built a couple tools for the organization. And I then left that role and became a sales director for the company and back in Virginia. So I did a lot of moving with the company. I was with Nationwide for about 18 and a half years.
Oh.
It's at some point landed me in Georgia, and I was opening up insurance agencies in Georgia. I ran a couple of different offices, and then I had a leader that used to be with me at Nationwide who tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, why don't you come over to Farmers with us and see what you can do here?" So I went over to Farmers and I actually recruited about 200 or more of those agents in Georgia. At the time, grew that state. And then 4 years later, was asked to be the vice president over at AAA. I started out being a vice president over one of the subsidiaries that focused more on educators. And then I went to the bigger company about 2 years later and ran operations, sales, distribution, marketing, and recruiting. And
So,
then
yeah.
that was my journey.
Okay. Wow. One thing
Yeah.
that really is sort of the common denominator in all of that is, from what I hear, everything that you stepped into, you were invited into. I'm curious how much of what you did, how many of those paths were anything you would have actually chosen or been intentional about yourself?
I know. Although I was invited into a lot of those roles, I'll tell you, all of them were not existent, and so I had to make those roles my own. And I had to evolve and build those roles. And I think at heart, I'm a problem solver, and so I think given the opportunities the way they were all presented, I think I would have chosen all of them because each time I learned something that took me to the next role and to the next role. So that's kind of how when I ended my career, that's why I was over so many different segments because I had so much different varied experience.
Yeah, and that's where the real excitement I think in your story comes in is everything you just described sounds like someone else's dream maybe, but that's exactly the point. It wasn't your dream. And at some point you decided, this is all great, but there's something else. And I'd love for you to unpack what that was, when that was, how all that came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I decided, when you're when you're working in corporate, you're always building someone else's dream. You're always giving goals. Every year, didn't matter what you did the prior year, is what you're doing for me now. At some point, I think that the 8 years I was at my last company, I had six different leaders. So the strategy was constantly changing and was never really been fully implemented. That's frustrating. It was frustrating for me. It was frustrating for my employees. And then the company was wanting to reclassify roles. So when they wanted to reclassify roles, that was kind of my exit strategy. And then initially, I said, like anybody else, I said, well, let me look for something else. And then one day I was sitting in front of someone interviewing for a role, and I said, this is just a different shingle, same stuff. I'm going to start looking for something for myself. Because if they only want to pay this, I'm going to bet on Stacy and go find my own options. And so that's kind of how I started looking into being a business owner. And then at the same time, something significant happened in my family. But my biggest cheerleader was saying, keep going forward. Don't stop your dream because of this. And so I started exploring all kinds of things. I thought maybe I could go do something like, power washing. You know, that would be different for me. I wouldn't have all the, how hard could it be? But then I realized I wasn't an outside type of person. So one day I stopped and said, why did I like the 36 years I was in insurance? What was it about that time that I like? And it was people. When I was an agent, I was always helping people solve their problems. When I went into leadership, I was mentoring, coaching people, helping people start their agencies, changing the trajectory of their lives. And so when I found the entrepreneur source, it just seemed like a natural fit because now I'm doing the same thing, helping people.
And so that is the name of the company that you're operating under now as a independent, uh,
Yes.
what would that
Franchise
be?
owner.
Franchise owner.
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about the type of people you specifically help now with the entrepreneur source? Is it any particular type of industry or?
No, actually, anybody that's have been laid off, anybody who's been burnt out, anyone transitioning out of the military, anyone who's ever dreamed of having their own business, someone that's, took entrepreneurial or risk management class in college and getting out and decided, very early on, I don't want to work for anyone else. I want to be my own boss. So essentially, anyone that has the curiosity to see if they could be their own boss and are ready to bet on themselves.
Okay. No, a lot of people, and I can think of several right now in my mind, would say you gave up a lot of security in doing what you did. And I loved what you said about how you bet on yourself. You bet on Stacey. You decided that was worth the bet, and good for you. But what would you say to someone who is maybe thinking about making some sort of pivot like this in their career or starting a business? And that's what their internal dialogue is it's kind of hijacking them and saying, "But wait a minute, you're getting a steady paycheck. You've got it made right now. Why do you want to rock the boat?" What would you say to them?
You know, I first and foremost, I would say that jobs aren't as secure as they once were. And every year you put off fulfilling your own dream, you're just building some CEO. And one day they're not going to need you anymore. And you would have spent your hard energy building what their dreams are. You owe it to yourself just to explore. Just to explore, is this the right opportunity? And I can tell you, even with my role, my last role, I told you they wanted to reclassify roles and they wanted to take away 100,000 of my salary. So how stable really is working for someone else? Now I don't have any ceiling on how long I work. My income is unlimited. I put in the same or less energy. Actually, when I was working corporate, I was always on my cell phone. I was working 60 hours, 70 hours. I probably have worked only 38 to 40 since I've started this business. And, I don't start working till 10 o'clock on Mondays and I get off at 3 o'clock on Fridays. Those are choices you get to make and you don't have to ask for permission. So I think those are the things that people should think about. Is it really stability? But most importantly, when my husband got sick and I didn't have to ask for permission to be off. And I didn't have to worry about whether my job was going to be there when I got back or what would it look like. And those are the things I think people should owe it to themselves to really stop and think, is there really stability with or getting a paycheck or how long is it going to last?
Yeah, I really love the way that you presented everything. And I would like to ask that after you said like 36 years, you changed your course. And I would like to ask, what is the real security for now for you? And you have redefined success. What success means to you now after you changed your course, as I said?
I think success means a lot of different things. For me, when I was in corporate, I think success meant getting the next job, getting the next promotion. Now, I think success means the lifestyle that I've earned for myself. You know, being there, being able to be emotionally there for my daughter. Lifestyle was important. I've exceeded what I made in corporate. So that's success. But more importantly, the last 2 years of my life, my husband was fighting a battle, his health. And I was able to be there for him mentally, emotionally, physically, and I never felt bad about my business. My clients were supportive. I needed to be able to have the flexibility and be able to work anywhere. So those are success stories for me now. And I realize, more importantly, not to put off today because tomorrow may not come. And so success for me now is also doing what always wanted to do and fulfilling, traveling, being able to be more present with individuals, being able to stop and just listen to individuals. So I feel like, I've success is just exactly where I am right now in my life.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. Mm.
Yeah. When it came to your husband's illness and being there for him, I know from personal experience that caregiving for anyone, especially someone that close to you, a spouse, I can't relate to that, but caregiving in general requires a level of self-leadership, a level of understanding and compassion that no job would demand of you. And I'm curious, what do you think about your path to that point had really prepared you for those difficult moments? Difficult is like the biggest understatement I know, but what would you say helped prepare you for those moments?
You know, I think what it did for help me prepare was jumping in and helping him solve the problem,
Mm.
helping him trying to find solutions if there were any. His when he got diagnosed, he was already incurable. But I wanted to continue to give him the hope and continue to do my research and with him. And if we were here in Florida with Moffitt, and we went to Emory in Georgia, and we went to MD Anderson in Houston, and I was calling this person at Dana Farber. I mean,
Yeah.
the research and following through, I think that's what my past life had prepared me for this, because I just jumped in and started in motion. What it didn't prepare me for was realizing there was going to be a day that I just couldn't help him anymore. And I needed my job, my role at that point was making him as comfortable as he could possibly be until he took his last breath. I never wanted anyone else to take care of him. I wanted to be that person to do that. And, you know, I never hesitated to take care of him, going back and forth to appointments. And I think, I just wouldn't have changed it. I got so much peace and so much happiness being there to be able to take care of him. One day, my daughter and I was laying down, and we said, this is after he had passed, and we both looked at each other and said, I wish he was here so we could change his poopy diaper, because he was with us. Even though it wasn't his best moment, he was with us.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't think anything could prepare you for that. But I think how you respond, the person that's going through that, I never realized how much pain he really was in until I had a doctor say, Shirley, you have cancer in every bone of your body except for your fingertips, and you're going to die from this disease. I know he always complained about his knees, and sometimes he'd talk about his back, but I didn't realize how in depth his pain was until after hearing that message. And it was hard because
Yeah.
I think about the times I thought, let's push him to get up and let's do this, let's push him to do that. And it was so hard for him.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Stacey, again, I'm profoundly sorry for your loss. It has not been long. I remember when we had our conversation, I was just stunned that you were even able to speak of it this soon after. And so my heart goes out to you again. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to watch your spouse suffer like that. But I can relate to, wishing in some sense that they were still there to clean up after. As hard as those moments are, once they're gone, they're gone. It's hard. And so I just give you so much credit for not only staying with him, because not all spouses would deal with that, right? They wouldn't all stay in the picture. They'd bail in a situation like that. But not only did you have the steadfastness to be the loving partner that you were to him, but to be there for your daughter, to still be there for your daughter, give you so much credit. And no, nothing prepares you for some of those moments. Nothing at all. No book, no lessons, no nothing. But in terms of skills, you definitely had the grit that it required. You definitely had the research skills to really search high and low for answers and resources. And I do so relate to that moment where you realize, as good as I am, as much as I can do, now my role changes again. And it's a very, very difficult, sobering moment when that happens. And the fact that you continue to lead your business like you do, it's just amazing. It's such a testament and inspiration to me and to anyone, I believe, that's going to listen to your story.
I'm so sorry for your loss too.
Thank you.
And I can see how much you actually had to uh, be the boss in your life, in your business, and in your family at that time. I think that really takes a lot of courage and energy. And yeah, you actually need to be the real leader. And I think that as you did your jobs in all levels, I know that this is a big reward now that you don't have regrets, right? That you did your best and you were there for your husband and your family. And I think this is a big, big thing. And yeah, and my next question maybe would be, what kind of leadership did that caregiving ask of you? Maybe you could tell us a little more about that.
I think one of the things sometimes you don't get from leaders is empathy. And I think, you find skills that you just don't have, you never knew you had. And, just being empathetic, being one that showed up when I needed to show up, finding out what he needed to keep going. I was putting together teleconferences or Zoom calls for friends and family all over the United States just to do prayer with him and keep his hopes and faith up. The purpose of those calls was to keep them abreast of what was going on with him, but it was more importantly, it was giving him hope. It was giving him faith. And I would tell him all the time, you're going to need more than my prayers. You're going to need somebody. We have the community of people we need to bring together. And we did that. Before every appointment, for every treatment, we always brought our friends and family together to sit with him. I can't think of the words, kind of what kind of leader that brought out in me. I think I've had, yeah, I can't even think of the word
I
that
have a phrase that's coming to mind, and that would be servant leader, because you were both. You were serving him, you were leading the way to what he would need for those last moments. And,
Mhm.
one thing you said too that really stood out to me is you needed other people to help him as well. And one trap I think caregivers can easily fall into is, I have to do everything myself. I have to be it all. And it is the fastest way to wear yourself out. But you had the courage, because it does take courage to say, you know what, I'm not everything I he needs in this way. And so I'm going to recruit more people. I'm going to involve more people in specifically the spiritual support, helping him with his faith and his hope. You said, you're going to need more than me. And I'm sure in a way it maybe made his heart sink to hear that, but I'm guessing in another way he was saying thank you, because I wouldn't want it to all be on you. I don't know, of course, I never met him, but I would
Mhm.
imagine the love that you've shared, he wouldn't have wanted you to try and shoulder all of that on your own either. Right now, there are so many people that are dealing with this in their life. Someone they love is very ill or close to death, and they are balancing a lot too. And not to, stay with the heaviness here, but at the same time, if you're willing, I'd like to just get a few thoughts from you about what you might like to say to someone who's trying to balance all of this and how they can be sure that they're doing what they should do and can do, but they're also involving other people where they need to so they're not burning themselves out. What kinds of ideas, tips, resources you think you could share with someone who's in that place? They're running a business, they have a family, and someone they love is very ill and also needs a lot of their support.
I think first and foremost, I think you have to be true to yourself. And what I mean by that is really be true and honest of what all you can endure. For me, stepping in, doing all that I did, I think that's just how I'm wired. However, looking back, I'm like, how did I do all that? And I think having this, a lot of times when we're going through something, we don't talk about it. And I think, having that support system or having someone that you're talking to, just say how you feel. I mean, there were days that I would, I got a video of him and I going bantering back and forth about strawberries because he wanted strawberries. I gave him blueberries and he kept saying, well, I just wanted strawberries. And I said, I didn't want to give you strawberries today. I'll give them to you tomorrow. I don't want to do that. Blueberries were easy and simple. But, I think just being true to who you are and getting the support that you need and getting the help that you need. When I would go to those doctor's appointments, I was already ready for them. The doctor say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I said, oh, but we're going to do this too, right? He's like, okay, yeah, we're going to do that too. So you got to be able, if you're not doing your own research, ask for help to do your research for you. And you need a support system too. You need to be able to, what is going to be your source to walk away from the heaviness that you have. But if you want to keep that loved one as alive as long as possible, you have to be there for them. You truly do. You have to give them that hope. You have to give them that faith. We never talked about death. We never talked about dying. And, even on his hard days, he wanted to get up and go to church and so forth. I would push him. I would say, let's go, let's go. So I think you got to know that in order to keep them going is that you have to support them and you have to be there for them. But more importantly, I didn't realize I needed help until my daughter came home from college. And she came home from college and I was like, it was a lot of help because it helped relieve some of the pressures that I needed. I mean, he only wanted me to take care of him. And so when she came, I was like, Shirley, I need help. And she's here. And so he was like, okay. So he allowed me and her to help him. And I think it gave her closure too, because for her to get a phone call opposed to being here and seeing what I was doing with her dad, it was a different experience for her.
Yeah.
And it was hard for her too.
Yeah.
It's hard, but you got to get help. You have to get, if counseling is the help you need, you have to lean into that and get that support, get that help, and don't give up.
Yeah.
Keep trying even when they say it's not possible.
Maybe your husband's health journey actually changed the way you saw your work and your time and what actually mattered. So this was actually the time when you pivoted your career, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I really love the phrase you used in your writing when we prepared for this conversation. You said that you were pivoting with purpose. That is a good term. Yeah, I would like to maybe talk about what's the difference between making a conscious pivot and making decisions in the contrary to making decisions when you are in survival mode, right?
Yeah. When I left the company and I started looking for jobs and so forth, Shirley was my biggest supporter, my biggest cheerleader. And one day I knew I needed to do something to kind of come up with my next plan, what is going to be my A or B plan and what was that going to do? And I pivoted into finding my own business. I know I didn't have the capacity to build something from scratch, but I had the capacity to plug into something that was already proven to be successful, and make that my own. Um, I think, you know, as weird as it sounds, talking to other people who've done so many amazing things throughout their career was my outlet. I got to hear their story and I got to hear, how they got to where they were and why they was exploring other things. And I think that gave me purpose without dealing with what I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And it also showed me how compassionate and how understanding people were, because it's unprofessional to say I may have to counsel at a whim, but they understood. And I told them that at the very beginning of the discussion. I never know what tomorrow's going to look like. I may have to counsel at the moment's notice. I didn't have to do that often, but I think, that gave me purpose, helping someone else change the trajectory of where they're going and giving them the inspiration. Owning your own business, people, fear sets in for everyone. And so here I'm having fear with my husband. I'm having fear about, am I going to be successful as well? And I think taking the same attributes that I had my entire life into my own business, and also into my own home is the reason why I have survived. Um, it's the reason why I've continued to thrive and the reason why I continue to make a difference. And, I feel like this is where he wanted me to be. This is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, you also wrote that this pivotal moment of clarity actually became the catalyst for reinvention for yourself.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I loved it too that you said that the clarity didn't actually come until you started taking the steps. In so many
Mm.
words, I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
brilliant, and that's how it often happens, right? You launch out on a belief and faith, and then the staircase, if you will, from I keep going back to that Indiana Jones movie, the staircase, the steps, the bridge, whatever it is, appears as you take those steps. And that's what
Mhm.
you've done throughout your career, but you're really doing that now as you're betting on yourself, as you put it. What would you say is obviously so much has changed for you, even in just since your husband passed, but what would you say is the biggest why behind what you do?
When I talk to a client on a day-to-day basis, a lot of times they have been out of work. They've been out of work for several months, or they've been out of work for years, and they start feeling emotionally down on themselves. And, I talk to them about, all the success that they've done in their career, bringing back with all the proud moments that they have had in their life and not dwelling so much of what they don't have now and giving them the opportunity to discover on their own that there's so much more out of just working for someone else. Ageism is real. I mean, it is real, and sometimes gender is real. And so when I'm talking to those individuals, sometimes they're at their wits end at and I'm giving them hope. Sometimes I feel like they talk to me week to week because I'm someone for them to talk to. But if it gets them to where they're going, if it gives them the inspiration that they need to keep going. I've talked to people that's been in their 40s and they've lost job after job. And I've talked to people who've been in their 70s, but they may have a young wife and a young kid and they still need to work. And this gives them hope and it gives them the inspiration that they can do it because I explained to them, you're putting the hours in now working for someone else. How long did you work? What were you doing? Why couldn't you take all those transferable skills and do it for yourself?
Yeah.
What's the difference? If you put that in for someone else's dream, why wouldn't you do that for your own dream? And I think giving people and when people transition out of the military, a lot of times what they want is to spend more time with their family. They've been away on for years sometime, and they want to be with their families and they want to make a difference there. And, so many times it makes me happy when I get to connect with a veteran who's transitioning out of the military and they don't know how to operate in civilian life. And, I sat there and I talked to him about, well, it's not much different. Just let's talk about that. And then we start talking about what their dreams are. So that to me is my why.
Yeah.
And I think it's always been my why from the very beginning. It's being able to sit there across from someone and then be able to bring their purpose to fruition, be able to be a part of their dreams. I never talk to them again, but I always like to look back and say, well, where are they at now?
Mm.
And if they continue to be successful and continue to thrive and know that I was a part of that, that was my why.
That's a beautiful thing. And, I have to say, not to get all wooey and, all that, but this is physics, right? Is the quantum realm. Is just, you have no idea how, like, that entanglement with people that you've talked with and coached and encouraged, that ripple effect is a very real thing. And that impact, it will be felt for generations. And I'll be as bold as to say, I think that you are as successful as you are because what you're really doing is you're facilitating someone's transformation through hope, through being able to see possibility where they can't now, especially because, like you said in so many words, they're likely in somewhat of a survival mode themselves because they've been down and out and maybe questioning their every life like decision at that point. And so again, I give you so much credit for doing what you do. And I think it's amazing. And I wish there was a way that you could see. I know you see it in your mind's eye and it's why you do what you do, but I wish there's a way you could see the actual ripple effect that's happening even right now as you tell this story. There's someone in another state that is now on their feet again. Why? Because you encouraged them to look at what was possible instead of what they lost. And that is a beautiful thing. Thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah, and you actually learn them to bet on their selves, right?
Yeah, I think that, and I'll tell you where I got that from. One day I was when I was trying to contemplate what is my plan B or what's my plan A gonna be my B. I got a phone call from a girlfriend that I hadn't spoken to in 6 months. And she called me that morning. She said, Stacy, I don't know what happened, but somebody told me to call you today and tell you yes. And I said, yes to what? She said, I don't know. It yes. So I said, she said, what's going on with you? I said, well, I'm trying to contemplate whether or not I'm gonna go in business for myself and do this. And she said, oh my goodness, if anybody can do it, I know you can. So that's your yes. And probably about 5 minutes later, she sent me her daily devotion and it said, bet on yourself.
Wow.
And that's, I've never lost sight of that. If
Yeah.
I'm not going to bet on myself, who will? And I feel like, and think about it over my career, every time I went into a job that I didn't know, I took a job one time as a secretary and I didn't even know how to type, but that's just who I am. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to make it happen. So I think I've always betted on myself, and why stop now? So
Yeah. Good for you.
Well, we have a question for every guest because we are talking about the messy middle, right? And yeah, we always want to ask our guests, who are you becoming? Because we're always growing, right?
I feel like I am becoming the woman that I think I think sometimes when you're working in corporate and a woman leadership, you're silenced. And I think I was silenced, in certain situations so long. And now I have a voice
Mm.
and I am being who I want to be. And I'm not being anyone that someone's choosing me to be. So I think in all fairness, I'm being who I have wanted to be my entire life. I'm showing people who I am and why I am who I am and having that voice and showing my daughter that, life circumstances doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You know, you got to just figure out a way to build yourself up and get out of it, whatever things that may be bringing you down. So I hope that she sees that, despite everything else, I continue to keep my head held high. I'm not ashamed of anything. I continue to forge ahead. And I know that, greater things are ahead.
So
Yeah.
is there anything that we should have asked and didn't?
You asking me?
Yeah.
I think you guys gave me the platform to kind of share everything. I think you gave me the platform to share my past experiences and all the things I accomplished in my corporate life, but also kind of where I'm going
Yeah.
in my next chapter. And it's always means so much to me, or it brings me peace to talk about my husband. I mean, he was a remarkable person, and we had such, we were married 25 years, and we had such an amazing marriage. And I always, feel great or feel good when I have the opportunity to bring him in my day-to-day conversation. So I appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we so appreciate you sharing all of those things with us. I know, some of it was pretty tough. That's still fresh. That's still new. And again, just the fact that you're still doing everything you're doing and helping give people hope that need it and direction where they need it. And it's just a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for sharing. We're going to make sure that everybody knows how to contact you in the show notes. And like I said, Olga will reach out to you about that later when we're close to scheduling. But Olga, if you don't have anything else, I feel like this might be a good place to close things out.
Yes, agree. I'm really happy to meet you. It was a beautiful conversation, really inspiring, and thank you so much that you joined us and shared so many beautiful things. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't
Thank
wait
you.
to share your story with everyone. So thank you
I
again.
appreciate it. And hopefully I answered all your questions.
You
So,
absolutely did.
all right. Thank you
All
so much.
right. Thank
It
you,
was a pleasure
Stacey.
meeting you all. Show up on my calendar some other time, Rachel.
Yeah, sure. We'll
Just
stay in
accidentally
touch.
show up again.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you
Okay.
so much. All
Okay.
right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Stacey.